Welcome to a journey that challenges the narratives you've always known. This video is not about religion or institutional dogma. It's about reclaiming the true identity of the Yahawahs, often known as African Americans, and their connection to the tribe of Yasharal. For centuries, history has been rewritten, names erased, and lineages hidden. Today we begin to unmask the false history of the Middle East and restore the legacy that was systematically stolen. This is a call to those who feel the weight of lost heritage and seek the truth behind the stories that shaped their ancestors. Let's begin by understanding the author's purpose and the heart behind this message. Qari, also known as Yahawah, stands apart from religious institutions. He identifies as a Muslim in the truest sense, one who submits to peace and righteousness as prescribed by the Creator. He rejects the man-made cages of religion, focusing instead on the living truth found in ancient scriptures. Qari honors both the Bible and the Quran, seeing them as a continuous stream of divine communication. He accepts all true prophets and stands against superficial checklists and societal timelines, emphasizing the Creator's focus on the heart and mind, not outward appearances or arbitrary numbers. Qari fiercely protects the innocent, advocating for maturity and sound judgment before adulthood. He points out that true science and divine law align. Emotional and mental maturity is essential, not just physical milestones. He openly rejects societal norms that reduce relationships to transactions or legal ages, emphasizing mutual respect, emotional maturity, and spiritual alignment. His work is not for popularity but to spread uncompromised truth, tear down artificial structures, and realign lives with the Creator's perfect design. Message from Your Sister is a heartfelt reminder of belonging. The tribe of Yasharal is called to remember their Creator Yahawah and to recognize that they are never abandoned. The message is both a song and a proclamation. The people are the lion and lioness tribe leaders and the blueprint for others. Despite pain and exile, the Creator's love remains constant. The call is to return, to remember, and to reclaim the heritage that was never truly lost. 70 AD, the Roman siege marked a deliberate attempt to erase the Hebrew identity through the practice of damnatio memoriae. Rome targeted not just Jerusalem but the records and language of the people. Yet what was meant as an end became an act of preservation. The Hebrews, or Abars, fled south and west into Africa, following trade routes and carrying their identity into places unreachable by Roman and Greek systems. This migration was a form of resistance and survival. Migration from Jerusalem was a threefold act: escape, journey, and arrival. The initial escape led to Egypt, fleeing Roman persecution. The journey continued deep into the African interior, where linguistic traditions were preserved, safe from later alterations. Finally, the arrival in West Africa embedded the name into tribal structures and songs, acting as a lighthouse for the Creator's signature. This migration is not just oral history, it's documented in maps and place names. Physical evidence of this migration is found in historical maps. The 1747 map by Emmanuel Bowen labels regions of West Africa as the Kingdom of Judah or Widda. These place names are more than markers. They confirm that as the people migrated, they carried their identity with them, renaming the land to reflect their heritage. The oral traditions and cartographic records together form a powerful testimony of survival and continuity. While European scholars debated how to transliterate the Creator's name, the dispersed people maintained its original sound. Across Bantu and West African dialects, the root for the Most High or the Creator preserves the Yahu or Ya sound. The name was never lost, it was protected in the wilderness, carried by those who refused to let their signature be rewritten. This oral tradition stands as living proof of resilience. Greatest weapon against the children of Yasharal was not physical force, but the creation of confusion, linguistic and historical. The difficulty in tracing the name today is not a personal failure, but the result of centuries of systematic erasure. The transition from original names to slave-era European names was a targeted act of orphaning, severing genealogical and spiritual connections to heritage. Erasure of identity was a multi-stage operation. First, the linguistic disconnect. Original names were replaced, severing ancestral ties. Second, the erasure of memory. Removing the Creator's name and tribal names from language erased the ability to claim identity. Third, the void of replacement. New religious structures filled the gap, ensuring people remained disconnected from their true origin. The name, as the tribe's signature, was systematically removed to break the people. During the transatlantic era, stripping identity was not just a social requirement for enslavement, it was a structural necessity. By forbidding language and replacing names, the system created genealogical orphans. This ensured that the connection to the tribe of Yahawah was severed, making it nearly impossible for descendants to trace their roots or reclaim their heritage. Tactics used during the slave era mirrored the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae. Rome destroyed records and suppressed language. Colonial powers prohibited original names and enforced European naming conventions. This functional replacement ensured that the biblical identity of the tribe could no longer be spoken or recorded, deepening the erasure across generations. Forced orphaning of names and geography created a massive cultural and spiritual vacuum. External frameworks, including new religious systems, were introduced not as natural conversions but as strategic replacements. This ensured that the dispersed people would never return to their true foundation, keeping them disconnected from their ancestral heritage. Stripping a name is stripping power. The same logic used to Europeanize biblical names was applied to the people during the slave trade. This centuries-long design of erasure was deliberate, ensuring that the historical memory of the tribe of Yahawah could not be passed down. Changing names changed records, creating a false historical continuity centered on European lineage. In original Hebrew, names were theophoric, they contained the Creator's signature. By replacing these with white-sounding alternatives, the erasure went beyond titles, it removed the Creator's presence from the people. Examples like Hawa to Eve, Yahawah to John, and Eliyahu to Elijah show how the linguistic link to the Creator was systematically erased. Renaming was only the first step. To make orphaning permanent, a theological framework was needed. The curse of Ham and other doctrines were weaponized to paint the enslaved as cursed or demonic, justifying their oppression. These narratives were constructed to convince both enslaver and enslaved that their status was divinely ordained, not a man-made crime. False narratives locked people into spiritual exile. By teaching that their ancestors were cursed or evil, the system ensured they would never seek their true history for liberation. This was the ultimate damnatio memoriae, not just hiding identity but making people fear their own heritage. The result was a cycle of self-rejection and alienation from the Creator's name. So-called curse of Ham is based on a deliberate misreading of Genesis 9. The curse was pronounced on Canaan, not Ham or his other sons, and it was not a divine curse. The descendants of Ham are clearly listed in Genesis 10 and are distinct from the lineage of Yashral, who descend from Shem. The myth was weaponized to justify slavery, but the scriptural record tells a different story. By conflating the descendants of Ham with the children of Yashral, the architects of the slave trade created a lie that served economic interests. The children of Yashral are descendants of Shem, not Ham. The curse of Ham was a fabrication used to justify the enslavement of a people who were, in fact, the very people of the Creator's covenant. Quran is often misunderstood as a replacement for the Bible, but its true mission was to correct and confirm, not invalidate. Addressed to the Kedarite/Ishmaelite descendants, its purpose was to turn them back to the Creator. The Quran instructs Muhammad to seek verification from the people of the book, affirming the Torah and Gospel as foundational sources of truth. The message of the Quran was strategically misused to build a wall between the Kedarites and the descendants of Yashral. Instead of recognizing the true identity of the dispersed Hebrews, the text was manipulated to create division. This blocked the path that would have led the tribes back to their history, ensuring continued disconnection. The term Middle East is a modern political construct, not a historical reality. By labeling the land where Christ walked as the Middle East, the system detaches him from his African Hebrew context. This anachronism serves to obscure his true lineage and supports the narrative of a white Christ, distancing the Messiah from his actual heritage. To understand Christ's true identity, we must remove the 20th century map and see the land as it was, a unified landscape connected to Africa. The lands of the Bible were not isolated. They were part of a continuous region where the Hebrews lived and migrated. Stripping away the Middle East label reveals the historical and genealogical reality of Christ's lineage. Whitening of Christ's image was a deliberate tool of erasure, not just artistic bias. By replacing the image of a man from the tribe of Judah with a European icon, the system created a psychological and spiritual disconnect. Art became doctrine, defining the Savior for people forbidden from reading the text themselves and reinforcing the narrative of inferiority. The iconic image of Jesus is widely recognized as being based on Caesar Borgia, not the Messiah of the tribe of Judah. This was not an innocent artistic choice but a deliberate act of substitution. By presenting a European nobleman as the savior, the system codified a visual standard that alienated the children of Yashral from their own heritage. To restore the truth, we must return to the genealogical record. Christ was not a man without a tribe, he was of the house of David and the tribe of Judah. The genealogies in Matthew and Luke connect him directly to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, grounding his existence in the covenantal history of the people who were later dispersed and enslaved. The Book of Judges documents the recurring pattern of the people's behavior, forgetting the covenant, losing identity, falling into captivity and crying out for restoration. Each cycle began with departure from the name and ended with deliverance through a judge. This pattern is not just ancient history, it explains the generational struggles faced by the descendants of Yashral today. Cycles in Judges are generational patterns, not isolated events. Every time the people abandoned the covenant, captivity followed. The nations surrounding them were allowed to try the people, serving as instruments of correction. This history is a warning, leading directly to the events of the later dispersion and the fulfillment of prophecy. Judges 3 distills the people's history into a repeatable sequence: departure from the covenant, delivery into captivity, cry for restoration, and a return to error. The cycle shows that the law was not yet internalized, and the people continued to repeat the same mistakes, leading to further dispersion and affliction. The creation of the Slave Bible was a sophisticated tool of erasure. By removing most of the Old Testament and half of the New, the system erased the scriptural precedent for liberation and rebellion. What remained was a text designed to preach obedience to masters, ensuring that religion served the enslaver, not the creator. There is a difference between divine discipline and human cruelty. The diaspora was a correction for abandoning the covenant, but the nations went far beyond, engaging in systematic dehumanization. The Creator's own words in Zechariah 1:15 indict the nations for helping forward the affliction, turning discipline into atrocity. Slave Bible and the erasure of Exodus silenced the voice of the Creator in the lives of the enslaved. The system enforced a state where people were stripped of names, families, and humanity, treated as biological machinery. The nations consumed the people's identity, labor, and lineage for their own enrichment, fulfilling the prophecy of affliction. Renaming during the transatlantic slave trade was not just administrative, it was prophetic. Deuteronomy 28:37 foretold that the people would become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations. The labels assigned by oppressors blurred distinct lineages, fueling confusion and preventing the tribe from reassembling their genealogical history. Even today, the effects of systemic erasure linger in language. Some argue for reclaiming derogatory terms, but these labels were originally used to strip away true heritage. True restoration begins when the people reject the oppressor's titles and return to the name and lineage established by the Creator. The byword is not just a slur, it is a marker of dispersion and a fulfillment of prophecy. Recognizing the label as a byword is the first step toward breaking its power. The ongoing struggle to reclaim identity is proof that erasure failed and the covenant remains active. Middle East is a 20th century invention, a geopolitical label that never existed in antiquity. By projecting this term onto ancient lands, the system created a mental barrier separating the children of Yahshua from their history. In reality, Judea and surrounding regions were part of a contiguous African landmass, and the migration into the wilderness was a movement within this landscape. Prophecies about the islands of the sea refer to the actual geographical hubs of the transatlantic trade. The movement began in the African interior, funneled to coastal ports labeled as Kingdom of Judah, and continued through the Middle Passage to the Americas. These islands and ports were the final stage of dispersion, not metaphors but documented locations. Linking the West African coast to the plantations of the Americas proves that the dispersion was deliberate and controlled. The people did not wander into slavery, they were tracked, captured, and transported from their established refuges. The exile has a clear, documented address, connecting the dots from the wilderness to the Americas. Controlling a people begins with controlling their sense of scale. The term minority is a Western illusion, not a statistical reality. Globally, people of color are the overwhelming majority, yet are conditioned to accept a psychological designation of scarcity and dependence. This linguistic trap shrinks the mind and erases ancestral heritage. Minority label operates by focusing on local Western demographics, ignoring the global reality. When viewed planet-wide, people of color are the default, not the exception. Western institutions use sociology to classify the majority as minorities, ensuring that the global majority operates with a psychology of victimhood and dependence. The power of a ruling class lies in defining vocabulary. Accepting the word minority as a neutral descriptor is stepping into a linguistic cage. The term was weaponized to position the ruling class as the default and everyone else as exceptions, forcing the global majority into a state of perpetual deficit and dependence. The ultimate success of the minority agenda is when the colonized mind becomes its own fiercest protector. Conditioned individuals defend the system that erased them, attacking those who seek to reclaim their history. This defensive mechanism is a living blueprint of generational conditioning, ensuring the cage remains intact. People of Yahshua were double exiled, hunted, bought, and erased through both the transatlantic and trans-Saharan slave trades. Both systems worked together to strip away languages, bloodlines, and true names, replacing covenantal reality with foreign religious dogmas. The call is to look past institutional wrappers and return to the words of the Most High. Outer shell refers to organized religious systems built to fill the vacuum left by erasure. These institutions offer rituals and titles but lack the living covenant. The true relationship with the Creator is not about religion but about a blood-bound, historical, and genealogical covenant. Reclaiming this means walking away from the shell and returning to ancestral truth. New covenant is not about abandoning the law but internalizing it. As stated in Hebrews, the law will be written on hearts and minds, ending the need for institutional gatekeepers. The restoration of the tribe is a personal, genealogical, and spiritual process, not about joining a new organization but recognizing the direct path to the Creator. Restoration is a spiritual homecoming, not just a geographic return. The most vital step is reclaiming the Creator's name, the signature of the tribe. Calling on the name is an act of defiance against erasure, declaring that the covenant is still active and the lineage alive. The return is about standing in the truth of who you were created to be. The appendix provides scriptural evidence for dispersion, captivity, excess of the nations, restoration, deliverance, and the prophecy of the wilderness. Verses from Deuteronomy, Zechariah, Isaiah, Joel, and Hosea confirm that the journey and the promise of return were foretold. The Abari restoration chart further connects the ancient script to the living heritage of the people.